of today. Good night of Hanukkah, a good night of Hanukkah, a good and happy Hanukkah. Okay, we're holding in the portion of Vayeshev. We're holding Friday, the sixth reading of Pasha Vayeshev. We're holding on chapter 39, verse number 7. That happened after this story. Batisa, Ashes, Adena, Vesenel, Yosef, and the master's wife picked up her, so to say, she sent, focused on Yosef. Batema, Shikva, Imadi, and she said, I want to have a relation, lie with me. Now she says, Achar, whenever it says Achar Advarim, it means immediately following. So his second Yosef started to, as Rashi said yesterday, his second Yosef started to enjoy life, so to say, and started to show her his Masalsa Masaida, as Rashi says, started to play with his hair, so to say, comb his hair. So the Eibishter God right away brought upon him this story. And he refused. And he said to his wife, Hey, Baba Bais. He said, my master knows nothing in the house. And everything that he has given, he's put into my hands. Nobody is greater in this house. And he has not withheld anything from me besides you. Because you are his wife. And how can I do such a great evil? And I would have sinned to God. Rashi says that the children of Noach also had a prohibition against immorality. When she spoke to Yosef day after day, they did not listen to her. Lishkav etzla, to sleep with her. Lias ima, to be with her. Now she says Lishkav etzla, without a relationship, without sex. Lias ima le'elam haba, because she wanted to be with him. As Rashi yesterday, she did everything l'shem shamayim. This woman, even though she was an Egyptian, she did it for the sake of heaven, because she saw, and she wanted to have she saw that she would ultimately have a connection to the Jewish nation. It happened that day, Baisi came home, Lasis Malachte, to do his work. And nobody was home. Now she says, what does that mean? That is to say that a special day arrived, a day of rejoicing, a religious festival. And they, the household, went to the temple of their idols. She said, I have no more fitting day to have a relation with him than today. So she told everybody that she was sick and she couldn't go. To do his work. So here the Gemara says, Rav and Shmuel, there's an argument between Rav and Shmuel. One says he actually to do his work because he was known as a Jew in Mitzrayim, so he didn't go to the service of the idols. And the other one said to perform his needs with her. Yasim Malachte means that Yosef said, okay, nobody's home. This lady is driving me crazy. And she's actually threatening. The Medrash says she's threatening him. So he decided to do what he's got to do. But he saw the image of his father. The Gemara says he saw the image of his father. And he could not do it. As far as big day, she grabbed his garment. She said, listen, I need you to do this. Lie with me. He left his garment in her hand. He ran out. When she saw that he left the garment in her hand, and he ran out. She called the people of the house. She said to them, saying, ish ivri. Look, you brought us a Jewish slave. To mock us. Look at him, he wanted to come and sleep with me, lishkavimi, and I didn't want it. I called out with a loud voice, tried to rape me. Now she says, this is he brought upon us, but scripture did not explicitly who brought him in. He was referring to her husband. So look at my husband. My husband brought over here an evil guy into the house. Ivri, what's an Ivri? Me'eva Anar. That was the name that Avram Avinu was given. Avram Ivri. So Jewish people were then called Ivri. They were on the other side of the river. When he heard, I raised my voice. And I called out, Big and she left his garment with me. He fled and went outside. Big she held his garment until the master came home. She said to him as follows. She said, the following thing happens. The Hebrew slave that you brought upon came to mock me. To mock me, the Hebrew slave that you brought to us. And when I called out, uplift my voice, and I called out by Yaziv, big day, he left his garment etzli by me, by Yonas Achutz, he ran away. When Potiphar heard the words of his wife, when she spoke to him, these things, also li avdecha, what are you doing right now? As Rashi says, this is what your slave wanted to do. And self-understood, he got out. Rashi said, b'shas tashmis, while they were having the intimate relationship, she told him this, meaning your slave did such a thing to me, such acts of intimacy. So Yosef, the master, took him. Put him in prison. The place where the king's prisoners were imprisoned. And now Yosef stuck in prison. He was in prison for over 10 years. Hashem was with Yosef. He put upon him a charisma. He gave favor in the eyes of his masters. Rashi says chesed means that he was well liked by all those who saw an expression of beauty, charisma, bride, like chasuda. A bride is called a chasuda. In the Sarab and the warden of the prison gave in the hand of Yosef all the prisoners. That's in the hand of in the prison. Whatever they did there, he did. He was in control. Verse 23. The head of the prison, the warden of the prison, did not inspect anything. He trusted him implicitly, totally. Because God was with him. Whatever Yosef did, Hashem Matzliach, the Eibishter made it prosper. B'shvil, as Rashi says, because the Eibishter, God was with him. And that completes the Chumash of today. We now go to the Tanya of the day. We are in the middle of the first chapter of Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe is in the middle of explaining the concept of a Beinani, because as the Alter Rebbe said, we need to understand the mahus of a Beinani. We need to understand the mahus. We need to not understand the concept of a Beinani. We need to understand the mahus. We need to understand the essence of a Beinani, because the whole Tanya is called Sefer Shel Beinanim. It's the book of the middle man. So in essence or truth, since the Alter Rebbe felt, as you can learn in Tanya, that we all can be a Beinani, maybe we can be a tzaddik, maybe, surely you shouldn't be a Rasha. So we all need to try to be a Beinani. So if you have to be a Beinani and that's your job, then you understand that we all need to understand the essence of a Beinani. So the Alter Rebbe said a Beinani, most of us say a Beinani, a middleman, is a person that has, you might think, a person that has not more good than bad. Or at least half and half, 50-50, 51-49. So that's the way. Alter Rebbe proved that cannot be. Because first of all, Rabbah wouldn't have said he's a Beinani. Number two is we know that every Aveda you're doing, if you've done an Aveda, if you've done a sin, then you're a Rasha at that moment. To that sin, you're a wicked person. Alter Rebbe is still not happy. Oh, Damim Ba'alma. It's well known. There's a well-known saying: the Mechza Beinus. that that's the way people say it's an equal balance called the Baininus. And if you have a majority of virtue outweighs his sins, he's called a tzaddik. We know in the ultimate of judgment, the Gemara, it says that you're judged according to majority of good. So that means that a person is judged according to majority of good. And you have to make sure that you're always 50% one good. Because that's the way you judge, to the majority of good. That's the way it's brought down in the Pirkei Avos. The Rambam writes that the Alter Rebbe says, Ushem HaMashal, this is only a borrowed name, a figurative use of term, borrowed for its true usage in order to emphasize a particular point. Thus, the name Bein Tzaddik, denoting balance between merit and sins, are in fact but a borrowed name. What is it borrowed for? Le'inyan schar v'einish. It's in regard to reward and punishment. If you're worried about your Gan Eden, in essence, if that's all you're worried about, is if you're going to go to paradise, well, if you have a majority of good, you go to paradise. Don't worry. Because we're judged according to the majority of one's deeds. And you will be, if you have, that's why it says, why? Because we're Malayim mitzvahs kerimin. Because we have more mitzvahs, Baruch Hashem, than the opposite. So therefore, we're all going to be tzaddikim. We're all going to be vindicated in judgment. Everybody will go to Gan Eden. That's why everybody will go to Gan Eden, because everybody is more good than bad. And therefore, you might have to go to Gehenna a little bit to clean yourself off. But ultimately, you're going to go to Gan Eden. And Baruch Hashem, in a way, you go to Gehenna, you clean yourself off so you can go to Gan Eden. So everybody will be vindicated, because every Jew is full of mitzvahs kedimin. Every Jew is full of mitzvahs. So he has Avedis, but he has a majority of mitzvahs. And that's the way it is. You'll be acquitted in this trial. It's only in this legal sense of the term tzaddik is applied to one who performs more good deeds than evil. But that's avali'inyan amita shemater. When you come to the, however, if you really want to understand the truly defined distinction qualities of the ranks of tzaddikim, that's why we're not here talking about vindication and judgment. We're not here talking about where you have more or less. We're here talking about what's the essence of a tzaddik. What is the inner aspect of a tzaddik? And what is the inner aspect of a rasha, of a Beinani? Rabbi saying is therefore the sages tell us, if you want to know the DNA, the inner, the pnimius aspect of a tzaddik, what is a righteous person and what is a wicked person? Tzaddikim yeitzet seif shavta. Tzaddikim, their good nature is rules the judge. They're motivated only by good. They're motivated only by the godly soul. Why? Because as David HaMelech says, my heart is void within me. The Gemara says, what does that mean? It means that he killed his Yetzer Hara. He eradicated, he transformed his Yetzer Hara. Actually, it means he transformed his Yetzer Hara. He turned his Yetzer Hara into Yetzer Tov. And now he only has one judge, one ruler, one entity running the show. And that is his godly neshama, his godly soul. But if you haven't reached this level, every person knows who he is, and every person knows that he doesn't have one entity in his essence, in his being. He has two opposing opinions. Even though we all have more good than bad, so you're a wonderful person that has more good. Ain't of a milas tzaddik klal, but you're not a tzaddik because you have an evil force within you. You have a Yetzer Hara that's trying to influence you to do bad, to think bad, to speak bad, to do things in the wrong way. And as long as you have a force within you that is trying to impress upon you to do the opposite of what the Torah wants you to do, then you're not a tzaddik. Then you're not a righteous person. Maybe you're righteous in the amount of mitzvahs you have, but you're not a righteous person in the concept of what a righteous person is. And therefore our sages said, I just said, when it comes to the concept of having more good than bad, it says v'amich kulam tzadikim, because Baruch Hashem, people have more good than bad. So, but over here, the statement says, the message says that the Eibush saw there's very few tzaddikim. The Eibush saw that there's the majority of people are not tzaddikim. So therefore, the Eibush made sure that there is a tzaddik in every generation. What does that mean? As it's written, that tzaddik is the foundation of the world. Thus, each generation there must be a tzaddik who serves as the foundation of the world. So this concept of a tzaddik, a righteous person, are few, can explain only if a tzaddik is who is totally rid of himself of his evil nature. When the term tzaddik means those of good deeds outweigh the evil, why then do our sages say that the righteous are few, when the overwhelming majority of Jews have more good deeds than evil? All Jews, all Jews have more good over evil. So, however, to explain the matter, so that we better understand the level of a tzaddik and a beini, as well as the various gradations between the ranks. To understand now, we really have to understand what's the difference between a person that is righteous, he has no evil, to a person of beini that didn't do any evil. That's going to be the difference between a tzaddik and a beini. Difference between not having the capability to do evil, because he has no evil inclination, to a person that has the capability to do evil but doesn't do any evil, not in thought, not in speech, and not in action. So now the Alter Rebbe introduces us to what's brought down in the Kabbalah. The Chaim Vital writes in the name of the Arizal, Shad Eitz Chaim Shad Nun, which the whole Tanya is based on this. The Kol Ish Yisrael, every Jew, Echad Tzadik ve'Echad Rasha, whether he's righteous, whether he's wicked, Yesh Tei Neshamas. Every Jew has two souls. He has two souls. Yichsiv, based on the pasuk, that these are based on the pasuk. It says, "Neshamas ani asisi," and souls I have made. So the word neshamas is plural. Though the verse speaks of an individual Jew and indicated by the singular form of the word ruach in the preceding phrase, when the spirit of man, which emanates from me, will be humbled, the plural term of souls is nevertheless used, indicating that every Jew possesses two souls. Shein shtei nefashis, these are two neshamas, two souls and life forces. Nefesh achad mitzad klipa. One soul originates from a klippa. We learned klippas, but here's the first time the Alter Rebbe introduced us to this word, the next two words. Klippa is a covering. Sitra achra is meaning the other side. Klippa means a shell or a pale. God created forces which conceal the godly life force found in all creation, and that's called klippas. The question is how thick this veil is, how dark it makes the person. As a peel covers and conceals a fruit, and therefore you have some fruits that have very thick shells, and some fruits that have thin shells. Some fruits that you cannot eat its shell. Some fruits that you could eat its shell, which is symbolic to this concept too. Some fruits, some klippas are not you cannot elevate it, and some klippas have the capability of being elevated and to be able to be consumed, like the shell of an apple, you can eat it, or a grape. Sitra achra means the other side, the side of creation, that the antithesis to the holiness and purity. The two terms are generally synonymous. We use these two terms, klippa and sitra achra, intermingled together because they basically mean the same thing, but trying to give out a different explanation to something that's the opposite of holiness So it either can be a shell because it's covering over holiness, or it's the concept, or to explain is a concept, something the opposite. If you want to know what it is, something the opposite of holiness, kadosh. So you have in Hebrew kadosh and chayil, weekday and kadosh. Today, Shabbos is called kadosh, and Sunday is called chayil. Hamavdil ben kodesh lechayil, to be able to separate between something that is holy and something that is mundane. So these are two things that have two different days between Shabbos and Sunday. How do you differentiate? These are all entities that are seemingly similar, the same, but you have to be able to separate, to realize that one comes from Kedusha and one comes from the opposite. The opposite has many meanings to that. Lav dafke means that the opposite is something that is totally evil. The opposite does something that is not the concept of holiness. So chayil is nothing wrong with the weekday. There's nothing wrong with the weekday, but it's something that's not kodesh. It's something that's the opposite of holiness, and therefore comes the day of Shabbos is not the same day of the week. That's why you have to be mavdil ben kodesh l'chayil. So you learn Shulchan Aruch on Shabbos. What means to keep Shabbos? Ta'i b'dibur, b'machshava, u'b'maisa. Shabbos has to permeate not only action and not doing a malacha, but it has to permeate your speech. That your speech is different. Your speech is different on Shabbos than the weekday, and your thoughts are different on Shabbos than the weekday. If not, then you're missing the difference between kodesh and chayil. And whatever you're missing, you might not be missing in the aspect of action, the difference between kodesh and chayil. But ultimately, if you cannot speak on Shabbos different, or you cannot even think on Shabbos different, then you're missing the concept between what is kedusha and what is the opposite of kedusha. So really, the Sitra Achra is more of a refined word to Klippa, because in covering, we all can understand what covers over something. So really, the Chayil covers over Kedusha. The weekday covers over the Kedusha. This nefesh, this animalistic soul, which we're going to call an animalistic soul, is ultimately in the nefesh, where it originates in the Klippa of Sitra Achra, that it flows in the blood of man, giving life to the body. So in essence, my life of my body, physical side of me, is klippas, because it hides my godly soul. It hides the spiritual side of it. So I only see and I only feel my physical side, my nefesh. Kirasiv, as it's written. That's why in the 5 levels of the neshama, nefesh is the lowest level. Right? You have nefesh, ruach, neshama, chayi, chida. So with the nefesh bedamhu. Yeah, nefesh babasa bedamhu. The nefesh of the flesh, the nefesh that sustains the physical and corporal life, is in the blood. So that nefesh ultimately can be the nefesh, we just called it nefesh hachayunis, the soul of life. And from it comes all evil character traits. Within the 4 elements of evil. So these 4 elements, since it's the lowest level of the soul, so to say, it ultimately comes into the nefesh abahamis, my animalistic soul, my nefesh hachayunis, my soul of life that gives me my physical life. That comes in ultimately to a negative situation, total negative situation. Those are the 4 physical elements of fire, water, earth, are the foundations of all physical entities. So too this nefesh comprises of 4 corresponding spiritual elements. Since they derive from klippa and evil, they themselves are evil. And from them, in turn, one evil characteristics come into being. Now over here, the word evil, self-understood, does not mean because we're talking about spiritual things. So it doesn't mean evil in a physical way. It means, again, the opposite of holiness, selfishness and selflessness. So anything that has more of a gashmi, which in Chassidus means more independence. Independence. That a person, that the thing feels like a yesh, an independent concept. Then you have, that's the concept of the opposite of godliness. Because godliness is totally dependent. It's called Eir Eliki. Godliness is totally dependent on God and understands its dependency on God. But the animalistic soul, your physical side of you, feels more independent. That's yesh. That's why it's called yesh me'ayin, as we'll learn later. It's called something yesh. Yesh is ego. Yesh is independent. And the question is, how more independent I feel? I've not done anything wrong. I've not done an evil act. The independency is already a concept, the opposite of holiness. When a person feels independent, total independence, when his body feels that its Pashut has its own independent entity. It might be based on godliness, it might come from godliness, but ultimately it's an independent thing. Ultimately, it works on its own natural form. That shows on yeshus, that shows in the opposite of holiness, which holiness demands the concept of dependence, that we are totally dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why ultimately, these Abo Yesodis, these four foundations of fire, earth, air, matter, all these things ultimately can become evil because it depends how much a person feels that he's totally independent of godliness. He Pashut has his own existence. And what's going to happen ultimately? Ultimately, he'll have anger. If we're dependent, we feel totally dependent on God, then we're bottled, then you'll never have anger. Not that a person can have anger or gaiva, any ego thing in his body, in his being, that shows that he thinks he's independent. And that's the fire element, the physical fire element which we have in our existence, in our spiritual existence, in our nefesh habahamis, which gives us our dependence and tells us, you know what, you're dependent. You're independent, I'm sorry. You're totally independent. You're totally your own entity. And therefore, if somebody hurts you, somebody says something, you get angry. A chutzpah. Somebody said something to me. What a nerve. What an unbelievable thing that can happen. So that's once ignited by anger and pride, and man is like fire, soars aloft. Pride is the state of considering oneself superior to others. Anger, too, is the offshoot of pride. When a person is not proud, he would not be angered when somebody defies his will. Now, that doesn't mean you should not have pride. You should have pride in godliness. You should have pride in Yiddishkeit. You should be a proud Jew. But that's the pride of your godly soul. And nothing in the world should affect your connection to as a Yid. But pride in yourself, yeshus of self, that nobody can say something to you. Nobody has the right to contradict you. Nobody has the right to challenge you. That's a yesh of your own pride, your own physical pride. And that could be evil. The Gemara says, as the Alter Rebbe will bring later, that a person who gets angry, which I wish that we'd never get angry, but that's why whenever you learn this Gemara, it's like it gives you a little bit of a zing. That whoever gets angry, it's like worshiping idols. So when you get angry, it shows basically which idol you're worshiping. You're worshiping yourself. I'm worshiping myself. I think myself as an idol. I'm my own entity. What is the idol? The idol is the concept it has its own entity. It doesn't have a godly relationship. It has an egotistical relationship. With taiva, and if a person has taiva, he has this appetite for pleasure. So when a person can't control his desires, again, it shows on a concept of selfishness, the opposite of holiness. And again, we're not here talking about doing evil. Having a taiva is a good thing in many ways, in many aspects. But if a person cannot control his taiva, that's what the Mishnah says. Akina, v'ataiva, v'akaved. Ultimately, if we don't know how to control this nefesh habahamis, if we don't know how to control our nefesh hachayunis, our life, the soul that gives us life, that we don't have too much jealousy, we don't have too much taiva, we don't have too much self-covet, that it's important my covet, who I am, and nobody's going to say something to me, then you're going to, Metzinas Adam and Elam will destroy somebody from the world. Because water is the growth of all kinds of pleasure. So the ability of water to make pleasurable things indicates that it concealed within it the element of pleasure. Thus, the appetite for pleasure derives from the element of water, which is interesting. You should know that we also call water a mayim elatera. That the Torah is water. So here is the opposite of physical pleasure is the Torah. So the Torah teaches us what true pleasure is, because we know, as the Zohar writes, that the Torah is the pleasure to God. It's the tainug of the Eibishter. The tainug, the delight of God, is the Torah. So what should become our pleasure? Not the pleasures of the world, but the pleasures of Torah. We say the ruach, and frivolity, scoffing, boasting, idle talk emanate from the element of air. Like air, they lack substance. It's just a bunch of nothing, a waste of time, has no value whatsoever. It's just a concept of nothingness, and ultimately people realize that it has no value. Va'atzlus, this is the most hardest thing that we struggle with, and that is sloth and melancholy. You say the offer for the element of earth, which is the element that gives us the concept of, drags us down to earth. And the majority of a person's body, as the pasuk alone says, from earth you come, to earth you return. So the physical side of us has the element of earth, which is the concept of where our gasus, our selfishness, brings us down, drags us down. And that's why it's the opposite. We started off Tanya. It's the opposite of godliness. Godliness is simcha. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. The concept of godliness is the aspect of joy. And that's why simcha, peretz kol hagdorim, simcha breaks all boundaries, because it's the opposite of boundaries. When a person has simcha, he is unlimited. He breaks all situations, and he's disconnected from the concept of the opposite of melancholy, the opposite of the earth, which the earth gravity drags you down. So therefore, you have to be able to overcome this melancholy and overcome depression and feeling bad about oneself, as the Alter Rebbe will explain. God midas tevis, not only does your negative come from this soul, God midas tevis shebeteva kol Yisrael b'todesam. So too all the positive things that a person does. The Gemara says every Jew is bnei rachmanim, vaishanim rachmanim v'geimel chasadim. Every Jew by nature is rachmanis. They have mercy. They have a geimel chasadim. They're kind. So these are the natural forces that we have. We're Baruch Hashem, kind people. But that has nothing to do with the godliness. That has nothing to do with spirituality. That has to do with your animal soul, that God made you physically, naturally, a good person. But since the nefesh of klippa and evil, how could good characteristics come from it? How can good come from something that is a covering, that's seemingly the opposite of holiness? So the Alter Rebbe tells you over here something very Powerful. Because this soul that comes from this covering, what's called in Chassidus and Kabbalah, klipat noiga, which means a covering that shines. Like I gave you before, the example, the covering that could be eaten. So the covering has a value in itself. The covering is not a shell that you throw away. Like certain coverings of fruit, you throw it away. This is a covering that actually could have a value. It's a covering that's called that shines, noiga, that shines. Yesh gam kein tov, that there's some quality within itself, this covering. So this nefesh achiyunis, this soul that gives us vitality, that gives us life, also could be used out for good and could be transformed into good. That's how we can transform our nefesh abamis into good. Which Klippa, this is the esoteric, the Kabbalistic teaching of the story what we read a couple of months ago. We started the Torah, which is the tree of knowledge, which is comprised of good and evil. So once they ate from that tree of knowledge, of good and evil, now everything in life has a mixture of good and evil. So even the good we do, since we have this soul, even the good we do is a little bit. The question is how much evil is, how much yesh is. We're not calling it evil, but how much yesh is, how much self is involved. How much self is involved in this act? Am I doing it l'shem shamayim? Like I'm giving this tzedakah. Am I giving this charity for the sake of heaven, or I'm giving this charity because I'm a good person? Or what am I going to gain out of giving this charity? What is going to be my gain? Am I going to gain from this charity? So therefore I give it to this organization, not to that organization. I give it to this person, not to that person. Because where am I going to have a better gain from? Where am I going to have better pleasure from? Where am I going to have a better connection? That giving charity, but it's ultimately connected to a selfish act. And Baruch Hashem, that's not so terrible, but it's the opposite of holiness. You didn't do an Aveda to have some kind of a gain from it. But we're talking about truth right now. We're not talking about, because again, in a human being, that's our Yetzer Hara. In a human being, we define things by somebody getting hurt or somebody not getting hurt. Somebody getting hurt is evil, or even self-hurt is evil. Something that nobody gets hurt is holy. But that's not true. That is not true. And that's why you have to, when you learn Tanya, when the Alter Rebbe talks here about evil, he mentions evil many times. He's not talking about the evil the way we translate evil. That somebody was hurt. I hurt somebody, I insulted somebody. It's the opposite of holiness. It's the opposite of selflessness. Anything that has, again, selfishness involved, anything that has yeshus involved, then it's a mixture of good and evil. And that's what we have to work on. We have to mevatel the yeshus, bittul hayesh, the negating of or the overcoming or the subduing of yesh, of ego. That an ego, we shouldn't let our ego taint everything we do. And therefore, everything we do, there's some strings attached to it. And therefore, there needs to be what we says avas chinam. We need to have a true love of another person, or true love in general, that has no strings attached. There's no, I don't love you because of my gain. Because if I love you only because of my gain, then it's selfish. It's a selfish act, which ultimately, as the Gemara says, better to do a selfish act than to do no act. We're not going to argue with that, and therefore, better to do a mitzvah shalei lishma than do it lishma. But over here, we first have to understand what is lishma. What is the meaning of holiness and the opposite of that? And then we could say that even though you're doing it for the sake of a selfish act, maybe you should do it. You're not doing an Aveda, and therefore do it for a selfish act. As the Gemara says, from doing it for the wrong reason, you'll come to the right reason. If you're never going to do it, then you'll never come to the right reason to do it. So never wait for perfection. As the Alter Rebbe is going to explain, that's a Beinoni. It's impossible perfection. So you'll always have a little bit of selfishness involved. You're not a tzaddik, and you have a nefesh of Bahamas, and you have a Yetzer Hara. So there's always going to be a selfish kind of a tainted situation. But the question is how much? So therefore, you have to be honest with yourself. Alter Rebbe demands honesty. And the only way a person can have self-development is the only way is he can do that is when he has honesty, when he's honest with himself. Because if you're not honest with yourself, then it's very hard to change oneself. You're always going to fool yourself. The Gemara says, Adam oyev esatzmo, a person loves himself. So self-understood, a person never wants to say that he's not good. And even when he does not good, he said that he justifies it and he gives you 100 reasons why he's doing it. So he never did anything wrong. And that's the beauty of my independence. And the Eibishter gave me that. The Eibishter, in essence, whatever we learn in Tanya, the good and the bad, it was given to you by God. God gave you a nefesh elikis, and God gave you a nefesh Bahamas. You didn't choose that nefesh Bahamas. The Eibishter gave you this independence, the feeling of independence. The Eibishter gave you the feeling of yeshus, that you feel that you have ego and pride and kinna and jealousy. All these things were given by God, even anger. We have to, know how to use it out and know when to be angry. There's times to be angry. We find God got angry, Moshe Rabbeinu, etc. But there's times to get angry. That's the whole point of the Eitz Hadas Tevara. That gives us really our free choice. You have to realize this, that your nefesh Bahamas, your nefesh Chayunis, gives you your free choice. Your godly soul doesn't give you your free choice. Your godly soul only wants to do godliness because it is part of God. Your animalistic soul gives you the whole point of your free choice. And it gives you the capability of self-development. It gives you your self-worth. It gives you your whole focus in life. It is who you are, as the Alter Rebbe is going to say. Your godly soul is given to you as a gift. Your animalistic soul is given to you as to make you who you are and really develop yourself. Self-development, self-involvement, and free choice. The opposite is souls of the nations of the world. Shy clippers that tomatoes come from, emanate from the unclean clippers. The Alter Rebbe, many translate this. The Alter Rebbe is talking about idol worshippers. And ultimately, every the nations of the world ever do done thing out of selfish. They have no capability to do anything selfless. Since the nefesh emanates from the clippers, which contain no good, it follows that they have any good done is a selfish motive. Here's the Gemara, as the Gemara says. The Alter Rebbe says it's not my. Alter Rebbe got in trouble for this. He was challenged on this. But the Alter Rebbe said it's not my statement. It's a Gemara statement. The Gemara says the kindness of the nations is sin. This is a famous story of the Gemara that the three sages that got together to speak about Rome. And Rabbi Yehuda praised Rome, that Rome, look at the beauty Rome did to the world. They brought even to Eretz Yisrael, they brought roads and bathhouses, and they brought beauty, built beautiful buildings. Rabbi Yossi was quiet, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, everything they do is for themselves. They don't do anything for Torah and mitzvahs. Everything is for themselves. And that's why Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai had to run into hiding for 12 years. Because the Romans said, when they heard that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said that everything that the Romans do is all for the selfish purposes, they were out to kill him. And he got in trouble. So anything that the nations of the world, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, anything the nations of the world do, it was a self-glorification. So when a Jew acts benevolent manner, he's motivated mainly out of concern of the welfare of his fellow. The proof is this, that there were that were his fellow not need his help, this would give him greater pleasure than the gratification derived from the act of kindness. Right? So you know, the point is, I'm hoping I'm truly hoping that everybody has everything. I don't want to have people that need that I should give them. My hope is that everybody should be successful, and everybody should have all their needs, and everybody should have all their health, and they should not need my help. So in the nation's world, however, this is not so. They're motivated not by the welfare of their fellow, rather it stems from the self-serving motive, the desire for self-gratification, a feeling of gratification that they can help somebody. It should be noted that amongst the nations of the world, there are also found those whose souls are derived from Klippas Neged. That's an important thing, because the Alter Rebbe was talking about a specific kind of a group called the pious ones among the nations of the world. So the Alter Rebbe, as I said before, there are in the Torah you do find the righteous ones in the nations of the world that you see that even throughout history that gave up their lives for other people, and it was not for self-gratification. So this is not. So these righteous individuals are benevolent, not out of selfish motives, but out of genuine concern for fellow. The Alter Rebbe, but majority you don't see that way. You found Taka, you have in Israel today, you have the in Yad Vashem, you have the righteous Gentiles who put the life on the line to save Yidden. And Halavai, it would be double, triple, quadruple the amount of people that wanted to save Yidden. There would be more Yidden that would have survived. But it's not that way. Majority did not care about Yidden in that time. And that's why ultimately it affected the world. And Baruch Hashem, the world that's transformed, as the Rebbe said, once the world of the Yiddishkeit Torah has transformed the world, that has actually made a majority of the nations of the world do have chesed. Especially here, the Rebbe called America Malchus Shel Chesed. That over here, majority of people, Jew, even non-Jews, are good people and have unbelievable chesed, and are Hasidic Umm who do things not out of selfish mode, but do things out of the true, genuine desire. You should know, you should realize that also the Gemara says that Hasidic Umm also have Olam Haba. They surely have Gan Eden, and they'll also merit the resurrection of the dead, according to Kabbalah. So it's not exclusive to Yidden, this, and it's for everybody. That in essence, that we could all reach up to a concept of L'Shem Shamayim, for the sake of heaven, and not to do things out of selfish modes, but more out of a selfless mode. And that's what the Torah came to the world ultimately, and especially the learning of Chassidus came to the world to be able that we would all be able to work on our selfish mode to make it a little bit more selfless and to have a little bit more bittul. And that's why the concept of bittul, the aspect of humility and nullification of ego, is an important thing in the learning of Chassidus. And it's a development. It's a journey. It's not something that is even easy to do. It's a hard thing to do, and therefore it's an avodah. It's called avodah. It's not a gift. Some things are a gift. That you have an neshama is a gift. The Torah is a gift. The self-work is an avodah. It's called the service. It takes a lot of effort. And the Eibishter gave us this gift, the Torah, so that we'll be able to ultimately use it out in our avodah, in our service of God. And that's the way we need to connect more to Torah, learning of Torah, ultimately taking the learning of Torah and bring it down to reality so that we can partially use this gift in the right way. That completes the Tanya of the day. Second chapter of Tanya starts off with the Nefesh Elokis, but that's going to be tomorrow. And I hope you do continue the limit Tanya tomorrow by yourself. And we'll meet each other again on Sunday at 8 o'clock. We'll continue the learning of Chitas, but over here it ends today. Today is the 25th day, first day of Hanukkah. In Tehillim, it's the chapter 119, not the whole chapter, half of the chapter, from the letter Aleph to the letter Mem. And if you do that half a chapter of 119, you do the Chitas of the day. I wish you all a wonderful day, a good day of Shabbos, happy Hanukkah, and hope everybody goes to shul tomorrow. Tomorrow we say Hallel and Kiryas Torah, double the two Torahs tomorrow. And we should all have a happy and wonderful Hanukkah. The lights of Hanukkah should transform the world from darkness into light, and we merit to light the menorah even this year, the Beis Hamikdash. And we'll have the whole problem like it happened in the time of the Maccabees. The whole problem will happen again because we'll come to the Beis Hamikdash and we'll have no pure oil. So we'll have to have the miracle of Hanukkah again. And we'll have to be able to acquire pure oil. We'll have to light the menorah. Maybe we'll find they'll find another jar of oil and we'll light the menorah again. So let us hope we merit to that. Even today, we'll all be in Eretz Yisrael and light the menorah again, the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, B'mheira B'yameinu Mamish. I wish you all a wonderful and beautiful Shabbos.